Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going a deep dive into the book of 2 Samuel.
Ooh, exciting.
It is. It
I
is.
love 2 Samuel.
Yeah, and we're going to be looking for, valuable messages and hopefully glean some wisdom for a compassionate Christian life.
Absolutely.
This book, it's a lot more than just a historical record, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's like a tapestry of human experience and God's faithfulness woven together.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to put it.
It really is.
I think a lot of people, when they think of the Old Testament, they kind of think of, oh, all this kind of rules and regulations and all this kind of stuff. But
Yeah.
2 Samuel really is about those timeless lessons,
Right.
about faith and leadership, justice and mercy, all things that resonate with Christian values.
Absolutely, and that's what we're going to kind of tease out.
Mm-hmm.
So let's jump right in. We're going to start with David's rise to power in those early chapters, chapter 1 through 5.
Okay.
Right away, we encounter a really complex situation.
Oh, yeah.
David is returning from battle, and an Amalekite approaches him and claims to have killed the defeated King Saul.
Interesting.
Now, what's fascinating here, what do you think about this? This Amalekite, he seems to expect a reward.
Right. Almost like he's trying to curry favor.
Yeah. He brings Saul's crown and bracelet as proof, almost like he's, offering a trophy.
Well, look what I did for you.
Right. Look what I did for you.
I took out your enemy.
Exactly. But then David's reaction is completely unexpected.
Yes, it's quite shocking, actually.
He orders the Amalekite's execution.
Yeah.
And it seems so harsh, especially since Saul had been David's enemy for so long.
Yeah, you think he would be happy about that, wouldn't you?
You would think so, right? So was he condemning the act itself? Or was it more about the Amalekite's boastful attitude? What do you think?
It's a question that scholars have been wrestling with for centuries.
Yeah.
And there's not an easy answer.
Yeah.
But some believe that David was upholding the sanctity of God's chosen king even in death. The Amalekite, by his own admission, he took advantage of Saul's weakened state.
Right.
And in that time, that would have been a grave offense.
Interesting. So even though David ultimately benefited from Saul's death,
Mm-hmm.
he recognized the importance of respecting God's anointed authority,
Right.
no matter the circumstances.
Absolutely.
It speaks to a deeper principle, don't you think?
Yes, definitely.
About respecting authority and order, a principle that's reflected in Christian teachings about respecting, earthly rulers as ordained by God.
Right. It's not about the person, necessarily. It's about the position that they hold.
Right. And the ultimate authority, which is God.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting connection.
Mm-hmm.
So after Saul's death, the kingdom is divided.
Right.
David is anointed king over the house of Judah, while Saul's son, Ishbosheth, rules over the rest of Israel.
Okay.
And this division leads to, well, all sorts of tower struggles and even violence.
Right, because now it's like 2 different factions.
Right.
Of Israelites who are vying for control, and they both feel like they have the rightful claim.
Absolutely. So we have like the battle at the pool of Gibeon,
Yeah.
where we see the tragic loss of life, especially Asahel,
Right.
David's men.
Mm-hmm.
It really highlights the cost of these power struggles,
Mm-hmm.
even within, God's chosen people.
Right, and that even in the pursuit of what might be considered a righteous goal, like unifying the kingdom,
Right.
there can be these unintended consequences and tragic losses along the way.
Right. It's not always clean and easy.
No, it's not.
Yeah. But despite these challenges, David eventually unifies the kingdom under his rule.
Yes, he does.
He captures Jerusalem,
Mm-hmm.
makes it his capital city.
Great choice.
Great choice, beautiful city, wins decisive victories against the Philistines.
Yes. Those Philistines were a thorn in their side for so long.
Weren't they? They were always there.
Always.
So those victories were crucial.
Right. They really solidified his position as leader,
Absolutely.
showing that he had God's favor.
I mean, you can't argue with success like that.
Right.
Yeah. What a powerful example of perseverance.
Mm-hmm.
Even when facing adversity from enemies and internal division,
Yes.
David never gives up.
He keeps going.
He keeps going. He remains steadfast in his faith and committed to fulfilling God's purpose for him.
And I think that's a great lesson for us as Christians today.
Absolutely.
We all face adversity.
You do.
But it's in those moments that we need to remember David and how he just persevered,
Kept going.
kept going, and ultimately achieved what God had called him to do.
It's a great lesson.
It is.
And, I think we can all take that to heart and apply that in our own lives.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to take a quick break and then come back and we're going to pick up this story as David, really kind of takes the reins and kind of goes from there.
I can't wait.
Should be good.
Mm.
So inspiring to see how David keeps moving forward despite all these obstacles.
He's a really fascinating character, isn't he?
He's
Larger than life in so many ways.
But it's not always smooth sailing from here, is it?
Not at all. Yeah.
Chapters 6 and 7, they bring us face to face with David's incredible passion for God,
Yes.
but also highlight his very human flaws.
And I think that's what makes 2 Samuel so compelling.
I agree.
It doesn't shy away from portraying these complexities
Yeah.
of human nature, even in someone like David, who is often seen as this, idealized hero.
Right,
A
right.
man after God's own heart.
Right, exactly.
But he's also a man who struggles and makes mistakes and has these moments of,
Very real.
real human weakness.
Yeah, so like take, for example, the story of bringing the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem.
Oh, yeah.
That's a powerful scene, isn't it?
Such vivid imagery.
David orchestrates this huge celebration,
Mhm.
a joyous procession to bring the Ark, this symbol of God's presence, back to the heart of Israel.
Back to Jerusalem.
Yes.
This city that he's made the capital.
It's a big deal.
It is.
And David, in his enthusiasm, he dances before the Lord
Yes.
with complete abandon. It's a beautiful image, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
Of uninhibited worship.
Pouring your heart out to God without reservation.
Yes, just complete joy.
Total joy.
But then we have his wife, Michal.
Uh-oh.
She's watching all of this unfold, and her reaction is
Not quite the same.
a little less than impressed, I think we could say.
Yeah, she's definitely not feeling the vibe.
Not feeling it at all. In fact, she criticizes David for this public display.
Yeah, for not maintaining the decorum that she thinks is appropriate for a king.
I can just see her rolling her eyes.
Right, like, oh, honey, really? You're embarrassing yourself.
Yes.
Wow, talk about a difference in perspective.
Yeah, what a contrast.
So what can we learn from this? What's the takeaway for us as we think about our own, expressions of faith?
Well, I think it reminds us that there's no one right way to worship,
Right,
David's uninhibited joy.
right.
It might challenge us to examine how freely we express our own devotion to God.
Or are we holding back?
Yeah, are we afraid to be seen in our passion for God?
That's a great question.
And then on the other hand, Michelle's reaction raises questions about judgment and legalism,
Are we too quick to criticize others
Yeah.
whose expressions of faith differ from our own?
Right, because they're not doing it the way that we think it should be done.
Right. It's tricky, isn't it?
It is. It's a real balancing act.
Maintaining that reverence
Mm-hmm.
while also allowing for, genuine heartfelt expressions.
Yes,
It's hard sometimes
it is.
to find that balance.
And this theme of reverence is underscored by the story of Uzzah.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember him?
Who reaches out to steady the ark when the oxen stumble, and tragically he's struck down by God.
Ah, that's a tough one.
It is.
On the one hand, you can understand his impulse
He's just trying to help, right?
to protect this sacred object.
Right. But it's a stark reminder, though,
It is.
that while we should approach God with, joy and passion,
Mm-hmm.
we must also do so with reverence and respect.
For his holiness.
Yes.
His power.
Exactly.
Set apartness.
Yeah.
So, speaking of God's holiness and his plans,
Yes.
right after this dramatic event, we encounter one of the most significant covenants in the entire Bible.
Oh, yes. This is big.
God's covenant with David.
This is huge, not just in the context of 2 Samuel,
Right.
but for understanding God's plan for all of humanity.
It's a game changer.
It is.
So, God promises to establish David's dynasty forever.
Forever.
A promise that ultimately points towards the coming of Jesus.
When you think about that,
I know.
this covenant, made centuries before Jesus' birth,
Yes.
foreshadows the establishment of his eternal kingdom.
Mind-blowing.
It really is
The cornerstone of Christian faith.
It really highlights God's faithfulness across generations.
Absolutely.
It shows how he works through human history, weaving together these seemingly disparate events into this grand tapestry that ultimately leads to his plan of salvation.
And it wasn't just about establishing a dynasty, it was about establishing a kingdom of righteousness and justice, a kingdom that would bring peace and blessing to all nations.
So even with this incredible promise, though,
Mm-hmm.
David's story takes some really dramatic turns.
Oh, yeah.
There are moments where he falls short,
As humans do.
as we all do,
Yes.
where he makes choices that have really devastating consequences.
Yeah, and those struggles, those failures, they're part of what makes David's story so relatable, right?
Of course.
Because he's not this perfect hero.
Right.
He's a man who grapples with temptation.
Makes mistakes.
Yeah.
Has to face the consequences.
And in those moments of failure, we see God's mercy and grace shining through.
Even more brightly, I think.
It's almost like the darker it gets,
Yeah.
the brighter his light shines.
It's a reminder that even when we mess up,
Even when we stray,
God's love and forgiveness are always available.
if we turn to him.
If we turn to him, and that's such an important message.
It is.
Especially as we move into the next part of David's story, where we see the consequences of sin play out in a very real and heartbreaking way.
This is where it gets really intense.
It does.
Buckle up, everybody.
Yeah, we've seen David's triumphs, his devotion, his moments of, human weakness.
Yeah, it's a real roller coaster.
It is. As we turn to chapters 13 through 20 of Samuel, things get really heavy.
Yeah, buckle up.
Family drama, betrayal, rebellion.
It's like all the consequences of past choices come crashing down all at once.
It's intense. It's like a Greek tragedy.
It really is.
It all starts with one of the most disturbing events in David's family.
So awful.
The assault of his daughter, Tamar,
Yeah.
by her half-brother, Amnon.
It's just a horrifying act, and it sets off this chain reaction of pain and violence.
It really does. And then Tamar's brother, Absalom,
Right.
he's consumed with rage.
Understandably.
Oh, yeah. And he ultimately takes revenge by killing Amnon.
It's just a stark reminder of how deeply sin can wound,
It's true.
how it can fracture families and leave these lasting scars.
It ripples out, doesn't it?
It does. It affects everyone.
And the tragedy doesn't end there.
No, it doesn't.
Absalom, fearing his father's wrath, flees Jerusalem
Right.
and eventually orchestrates a full-blown rebellion against David.
He does.
Can you imagine the pain David must have felt being betrayed by his own son,
I mean, just the heartbreak of that,
forced to flee his own capital?
it's unimaginable.
It really is. Yet even in this incredibly dark period, we see these glimmers of hope.
Yes.
God's grace working through all the chaos.
It's always there, isn't it?
It is. David, despite his own failures, continues to cling to God. He pours out his heart in lament,
He does.
seeking guidance and strength.
Yeah, it's a powerful example for us, isn't it?
It is.
That no matter what trials we face, no matter how deep the pain,
Right?
God is always there
Always there.
to offer comfort and support.
If we seek him.
Yes, and ultimately the rebellion is put down,
Right.
but the victory is bittersweet.
It is, because Absalom is killed,
Yes.
despite David's pleas to spare him.
Right, and David returns to Jerusalem a broken man.
He could just feel his grief.
Yeah, it's palpable.
In his lament for Absalom,
It's like the raw emotion.
shows the depth of a father's love,
Yeah.
even for a son who rebelled against him.
Absolutely, and I think it also speaks to the power of forgiveness.
Yes.
A love that transcends even the most devastating betrayals.
Powerful stuff. And even though the kingdom is reunited,
Right.
it's clear that the consequences of sin, both David's and his sons, have left a lasting impact.
Yeah, they've left their mark.
There's still unrest,
Yeah.
as we see with Sheba's revolt and the ongoing power struggles within David's court.
Yeah, those final chapters of 2 Samuel, they really drive home this point that our actions have consequences. They have ripple effects.
They do.
And they can impact not just ourselves, but those around us.
For generations.
Yeah, for generations to come.
Wow. So as we wrap up this deep dive into 2 Samuel, it's been quite a journey.
It has.
We've seen David's incredible rise to power,
His charisma.
moments of deep faith, devotion, but also his human failings.
Yeah, his flaws.
And the consequences that follow.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
It's all there, isn't it?
It is. And what strikes me is that despite the darkness, despite the pain and the tragedy, there's this enduring thread of hope running through the entire book.
It's the hope that comes from knowing a God who is always faithful.
Even when we are not.
Even when we are not. A God who offers forgiveness and redemption even in the face of our worst mistakes.
It's never too late to turn back to him.
It's powerful, and that's the beauty of 2 Samuel.
Yeah.
It's a story that reflects our own human experience.
It shows us that even in our brokenness, even in our failures,
We can find grace and hope.
in a God who loves us unconditionally.
Unconditionally. So as you reflect on 2 Samuel, what resonates with you most? What wisdom can you take from this ancient text and apply to your own life today? How can David's story, with all its complexities and contradictions, inspire you to live a life of greater faith, compassion, and courage? We hope this deep dive has encouraged you to see those timeless truths embedded within these pages, truths that continue to speak to us across the centuries, guiding us on a path toward a deeper understanding of God, ourselves, and the power of his unfailing love. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into 2 Samuel.